April 1975. The air in the prison tasted like boiled pennies and old rain. We slept on wooden planks that sweated in the heat and woke to the sound of keys that never turned for us. They'd taken our names, then our belts, then the idea that days had ends. After a while, you learn to breathe small, so the walls don't notice you living. I was a sapper once, engineer, demolitions. The kind of man who knew the alphabet of explosives by the weight in his palm. The war had stripped that knowledge down to bad habits, counting distances under my breath, measuring doors with my eyes, sleeping with my back to brick. In prison, none of it mattered. The war was outside, getting louder. Inside, time was a slow drowning. Nights, the floor shivered with far-off thunder, not storms, artillery, like someone dragging iron furniture across the sky. The guards whispered. People were leaving the city with bags that looked like children. Most of us weren't going anywhere. The day they came, the sun had the color of thick tea. We were lined up in the yard, bare feet on warm gravel. A South Vietnamese colonel walked with a US man I didn't know. American boots, American sleeves rolled high, a face that looked both young and already finished. He carried a leather folder like it was a wound he didn't want to open. You, and you. The colonel's finger moved like a metronome. 12 of us. A thief with cat eyes. A deserter who kept praying and forgetting the words. Min, who used to guard things no one was allowed to see. Me, who used to make bridges fall down and pretend it meant something. They put us in a room with a fan that didn't work. The American stood with his back to a chalkboard stained the color of failures. He waited for the door to close. Then he looked at us like he'd been told to count a field of graves. Name's Doyle. Captain. Demolitions. He didn't offer a hand. He offered a cigarette. 2 of us took one. The rest inhaled the smoke anyway, out of habit. There's a depot near the border. We need it gone before the wrong hands pick it clean. You do this, your records evaporate. You walk. Walk is a beautiful word in a prison. It blooms in the throat before the mind can warn it. This is voluntary, the colonel said, which is the kind of lie that fits in a uniform. You are already paying for what you've done. This is a chance to rebalance the books. Freedom, Cat Eye said. The colonel tilted his head like he was measuring a shelf. If you survive. The folder opened. Aerial photos slid across the table. Rectangles of green and shadow. A crease of river like a knife wound. Someone had drawn grease pencil circles. Numbers that felt like prayers left in a temple. The caption read, "Nothing we could use in conversation later." The kind of map you burn after the first look. We go at night, Doyle said. In and out. Plant. Sequence. Like the jungle from the roots. You follow my hand, not your fear. He tapped the photos with a nail chewed to the quick. I watched his hands like they were radios. Men who spend their lives near explosions develop a tremor all their own. The body's Morse code. His didn't shake. Only his voice did, at the edges. I asked the question that had been walking laps in my skull. Extraction. Doyle's eyes flicked to the colonel, then back. A room can lean if someone avoids a word. We'll discuss that on approach, he said. Min leaned close enough that I could smell the iron in his sweat. I've been near that river, he said. I used to stand outside a fence and guard the inside of my own curiosity. He meant the American places that had no names we could keep. The places where trucks went in big and came out light. You don't have to go, I told him. The words felt like coins I couldn't afford to spend. We're already going, he said. We just don't know it yet. The colonel spoke again, voice polished by duty. You are dead men who can still be useful. Be useful, and you may live. No one saluted. There's no room for ceremony at the bottom of a well. We signed our names on a paper the color of sleep. The pen clicked, and the sound was louder than any oath I'd ever taken. They unshackled our wrists and replaced the metal with a promise. Back in the yard, the light had turned the color of old bone. The gate opened a little, tasted us, then opened all the way. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city was stuffing itself into suitcases. The sky was putting on its worst shirt, and the roads were learning the names of strangers. On the truck, I sat with my back to the cab and let the wind rinse the prison out of my hair. The other men counted the buildings like they were learning to read again. Doyle sat on a crate, eyes closed, lips moving. Some men pray without believing. Some men believe without praying. He looked like a man who had learned to do neither. The road unspooled. We passed a school with no glass, a market wearing dust, a church with a door that kept swinging like it was unsure whether to bless or swallow us. I watched the city turn into fields, fields into trees, trees into the kind of green that eats sound. I realized that voluntary is just a word you say when your footprints already point in one direction. That night, we stopped at a ghost airfield where the runway had grown hair. Doyle drew our route in chalk on the side of the truck. A white artery through a body that didn't want us. He said the word timers, and his voice steadied. He said margin, and I felt the numbers settle into the bones of my hands. When the lantern was doused, the dark didn't arrive. It rose from the ground. I lay down with my pack under my head, measuring the distance to the border in breaths. In a prison, men die and nobody writes it down. On missions like this, men live, and nobody writes it down. I decided to remember for both. I closed my eyes. The jungle began practicing our names. Dawn found us already moving, the truck coughing up the last dry miles of the city. Saigon slid off our shoulders in pieces. Concrete, then tin, then the color of rice water as the road turned to dust. The prison smell lingered in our shirts like a superstition. We were 12 men on benches that complained with every rut. Min sat across from me, counting telephone poles the way gamblers count seconds. Cat Eyes watched the back gate through half-lidded patience, like he expected the road to blink before we could. Doyle rode on the tailgate with one boot swinging, a metal thermos between his knees. He wasn't drunk, but he carried last night's whiskey like a bruise. We traveled beneath a sky already too bright, past houses that had learned to keep their windows closed in daylight. Women pumped water with a rhythm that made the day behave. Children stared with the seriousness of judges. Every so often, a man with a bicycle and a 1,000-yard stare crossed the road and didn't look at us. People learned not to see things before the war taught them how. First stop's a service strip, Doyle said, knocking the thermos against the tailgate twice. South of here. We swapped wheels and paperwork. Then we're air for a minute. Then we're shadows. Air? Someone asked. You said border on foot. I say a lot of things, Doyle replied, and capped the thermos like a secret. The driver laid on the horn at a herd of oxen whose job it was to look unimpressed. Dust climbed into our lungs and settled there with the rest of our regrets. When the truck shook, I felt for my kit the way men feel for a pulse. Fuse, caps, pencil timers, waxed tape. A coil of green wire that remembered every twist of the last war. The service strip was a ghost with a painted smile. A corrugated hangar slouched at the edge of a runway gone to weeds, as if grass could forget that men once taught metal to fly here. 2 jackets waited by a table of oily rags and clipboards. No names, just nods. The kind of people who had learned to accept that names were fragile. "You're late," one jacket said. "We're alive," Doyle answered, and that ended the conversation. We took on new plates, a second spare, and boxes that nobody opened. The jacket stamped Doyle's papers with a noise like a gavel in a small courtroom. I caught the stencil on one crate. Equip, survey, non-essential. The kind of label that meant very essential, but for someone else's conscience. Doyle spread aerials across the hood of a Jeep with sun-blistered paint, securing corners with 2 rifle magazines and a wrench. The photos were the same I'd seen, only meaner in full light. The river cut a black smile beneath the canopy, and the depot, our circle, sat like a grain lodged in the jungle's throat. 2 approaches, Doyle said, tapping north and south with the wrench. North gives you ridge cover, but she's slow and likes to break ankles. South is flat, fast, and made of eyes. We go north. Extraction? I asked again, the word already tasting of rust. Doyle picked at the callus on his thumb. There's a strip nearer to the border. 2 nights from target if we move well. If wheels meet us. He let the last 3 words fall to the ground and refused to pick them up. So maybe, Cat Eyes said. So maybe, Doyle echoed. But there's a definite for you. We light the pit before they do. Min leaned in until his shadow swallowed the river on the photo. I knew a fence near there, he said. The fence had no gate. The guards faced inward. Doyle's jaw flexed. He folded the picture once, then again, like he could crease it into a smaller truth. This isn't a confession box, he said. It's a schedule. We start now. We left the strip in a different truck that smelled of fish and old rain. The road narrowed, then forgot it was a road. Villages thinned into huts set back from the dirt like they were ashamed of being seen. The fields gave way to trees that had decided to stand shoulder to shoulder forever. The driver spit red beetle nut out the window and it flew back in, painting the bench like a wound. Midday, we hit the first checkpoint, a shack with 2 rifles, a kettle, and a radio sleeping under a damp rag. The younger soldier had a mustache still learning its job. He circled the truck, nose wrinkling at the fish. Doyle handed over papers that were actually theater tickets. The older soldier read them like he didn't recognize the alphabet, but trusted the ink. Survey team, Doyle said in Vietnamese good enough to pass at a distance. Bridges. Flood season. No flood, the older soldier observed. Not yet. The kettle sang. Men can only be suspicious for as long as water takes to boil. We rolled through as the radio woke and hummed a song about a different day. Afternoon. The hills arrived. The engine lost its nerve on the climbs, and we finished them on foot. Packs biting, sweat measuring our backs in salt lines. The jungle closed its mouth behind us, a slow swallow. Every sound had a twin. The bird that was a man. The man that was a branch. You learned to tell the difference because the first mistake was also the last. Why us? The deserter asked later, when the road was only a memory and the light had begun to lean. Why prisoners? Because we're already gone, I said before Doyle could. And because we know how to keep our hands still when things hum. Because if we don't come back, no one misplaces a medal, Cat Eyes added, practical as a knife. At a creek, we drank through cloth that pretended to be filters. The water tasted of tin and old leaves, and something that had drowned there last season. We filled canteens, knowing we'd curse that decision later. The jungle teaches you to trade one problem for another. Near sundown, Doyle raised a fist, and all motion evacuated our bodies. He crouched beside a shape half swallowed by vine, a partial crate, the wood swollen, the stenciling shy. He dug with a boot heel, then with the flat of his knife. Inside was paper. Not maps. Manifests. Shipment numbers with the neat cruelty of a typewriter. Drum counts. Hazard codes that didn't admit to their real names. Someone had meant to move this, and then the war moved faster. "Pocket 1, Doyle said. "Burn the rest." "We're surveyors," Min muttered, but he struck a match anyway. The paper took like it was guilty. The smoke climbed to argue with the sky and then thought better of it. We pushed on until the road stopped pretending and the path turned into suggestion. The night pressed its forehead against ours. We set a cold camp, no fire. Only the slow sugar of stale biscuits and a strip of dried meat that tasted like a belt. Men shifted on their elbows, trying to arrange their ribs in a way that didn't exist. "You trust him?" the deserter asked me in the dark. And I heard the pronoun pick its target. "I trust the clock," I said, "and the wire. And my hands. Men are second." The jungle answered with a chorus that hadn't rehearsed, and we listened because there is no other choice. Somewhere ahead, a river cut the world in half. Somewhere beyond that, a circle on a photograph waited to become fire. Behind us, the road forgot our names. The border wasn't a line. It was a series of craters the rain kept trying to fill. Bomb balls grown over with elephant grass and shy flowers that didn't know what they were decorating. We crossed at dusk, our shadows long enough to step on. The earth there had a scorched smell even after seasons of green apology. Doyle marked each crater with a finger in the air, as if he were writing on glass. We slid down clay that remembered explosions, climbed out with the help of roots that had decided to be rope. The last light pooled in a crater and turned orange, the color of metal that forgot it was metal. On the far lip, the jungle rose to meet us like a jury. After that, we moved at night. Day belonged to the insects and the heat and men with binoculars. Night belonged to us, if we kept our luck fed. We wrapped our boots in cloth to teach them silence. The path was a rumor you had to believe in to see. Branches drew maps on our faces. The moon hid when we most needed witnesses. Our food was memory from 1972. Cans with labels bleached thin as onion skin. We opened them with a church key and a prayer. Only we didn't say the prayer out loud because it sounded foolish in this place. The meat tasted of salt and regret. The fruit, like rust, filtered through sugar. We ate because the body is a stupid optimist. The next day we'd pay in cramps that tied our guts into sailors' knots. The rain never fell. It condensed. It formed on your eyelashes and waited for a blink. It beaded on the tape around my detonators. It insisted through seams we thought were tight. Leeches found everyone. They were quiet workers. No complaint, no arrogance. Just a soft commitment to your blood. We learned to salt them and curse them with the same hand. On the third night, Loke's foot went black at the edges. A scrape from a coral rock we shouldn't have met this far inland turned mean. Red streaks walked up his ankle like handwriting we didn't want to read. Min boiled a knife and cut. His face studied and pale. We tried tablets meant for a different war. The fever decided anyway. We carry him till the ridge, I said. We lose the ridge, we lose everything. Cat Eyes nodded, the practical mercy of a man who's done this before without wanting to. We took turns with a litter cut from saplings and our own shirts. Loke sang names under his breath. His mother's, a dog's, a saint's. And then he didn't. At dawn, the jungle exhaled, and he left with it. We put him in a clod of earth beside a strangler fig. No marker. Not because we didn't love him, but because markers make promises we couldn't keep. Doyle took his tags and wrapped them in wax paper without ceremony. The ground closed like a slow mouth. Some men you bring home. Some men you hand back. That night, Vin didn't return from the perimeter sweep. He had the signal, a scratch, a second scratch, breath held, then a stone tossed. But the darkness gave us nothing. We waited 15 minutes, 20, 30. The jungle catalogued us with sound. Frogs, then quiet, then a single branch complaining in a way branches don't. We went to find him at dawn. We found his footprint, and then the place where even feet were persuaded to forget. Doyle started whispering to the lantern. When the world narrowed to its flame, he drew maps on brown paper torn from ration cartons, talking to the river like it owed him money. "Clean up," he said once, soft as if the word might break. Not recovery. Not rescue. Clean up. His pencil scratched a shake that wanted to be a circle, and then refused. "You talking to us or the ghosts?" I asked. "I'm talking to whoever's still listening," he said, and turned the paper so the lines didn't have to look at me. Midway down a ravine the jungle had almost forgiven, we found a corner of American wood. The grain rose under my thumb, the stencil hid under moss. We dug it out with hands and a borrowed entrenching tool. Inside, not ammunition, not mercy. Paper. Pallets of it. Swollen but legible where the water hadn't won yet. Shipment logs with dates like teeth. Unit codes with nicknames nobody says out loud. Hazard numbers that whistled past what the chemical actually was. "Pocket," Doyle said, voice flat. "And burn." Min looked at the nearest drum, grey-green, dented, ringed like a tree's year history. He tapped it and his nail came away with a smell that cleared sinuses and memory. "We shouldn't touch these," he said. "We shouldn't even remember them." We torched the dry edges. Paper folds into fire the way a body folds into sleep when it's too tired to fight. Smoke rose and dragged its feet along the canopy. I watched it and felt the shape of the mission slide inside my skull and click into a new place. This wasn't a demolition job. It was an erasure. Not the kind that makes room for new life. The kind that makes room for silence. After that, every step had weight. Even the birds seemed to say less. The men started arguing in whispers, which is the worst kind because it grows teeth. Whose water? Whose blister tape? Who walks point? Who is already a ghost borrowing boots? I broke 2 fights by offering a third option: movement. Motion sours some problems the way sun sours milk. Sleep became a card trick you could only sometimes remember. When it did come, it brought fever dreams. White rooms that smelled like mopped bleach. The click of typewriters, the hum of a generator. The cough of a man who did not want to cough. I woke with the taste of dust and numbers in my mouth and birthed each breath like a small apology. On the 6th night, we hit the ridge. The trees thinned into a kind of openness that felt unnatural here, like a bald spot on a proud head. The moon was practicing its brightness behind a gauze of cloud. Doyle signaled down, and we belly-crawled the last meters, elbows skidding on leaf litter that had its own opinion about our mission. Below us, in a bowl of green, the jungle hesitated. Vines ran to ground in nervous lines. A clearing held its breath. In the middle, 3 rusted Quonset huts, half swallowed by the earth that wanted them. Corrugated ribs showing through moss like the bones of some animal that learned to be a building. The roof seams leaked ferns. The doors gaped like they'd been about to speak for years and were losing the habit. The air there was busy. Flies with a steady job, mosquitoes filing their reports, beetles in a constant debate. Something dripped with the patience of a monk. The smell had layers. Oil old enough to vote. Paper that had soaked and dried and soaked again. Something sweet and wrong living under it all. Depot, Doyle said. But the word felt too neat. We go soft, he added. We go now. I checked the coil of wire, counted the pencil timers by touch, wrote the sequence backwards in my head, the way you keep a prayer from wearing out. Below us, the huts waited in their green coffin. The jungle leaned in to listen. We slid down the ridge like rain that had learned discipline. The clearing was a listening room. Every step felt recorded. Doyle's hand chopped the air, left hut first, then the middle spine, then the far end. His fingers adding math to the trees. Sequence is the story we tell the fire, he said. We write it clean so no one reads the ending. I took Cat Eyes and Min to the first Quonset. The door creaked like a throat trying to remember a hymn. Inside the air was a pharmacy of old oil, wet paper, and the kind of mold that thinks too highly of itself. Our beams caught dust that behaved like snow in a place that hated winter. Beam here, I said, tapping the rib where rust hadn't yet won. Cut a charge for the hinge line, 2-pounder to make the roof speak. And the heart? Min asked. We find it. We split, light-footed, counting seconds with our breath. I ran wire like a quiet river, clipped it to a pencil timer, and felt that familiar click. The small private handshake between math and fate. Cat Eyes stacked charges by the joists, hands steady, mouth open just enough to drink the air. Min moved to the back, careful, respectful, as if the room might be holy in a language we didn't speak. The middle hut was a throat stuffed with crates. Stencils bled through mildew. Records, archived, return, and personnel index. I popped a lid with my blade and the room exhaled names. File folders swelled with humidity. Photos curled, refusing to lie flat even for the dead. The faces were young in that immortal way. Men posing with cigarettes, women with solemn eyes, children holding tin cups that reflected the sky as if blue could be swallowed. Leave it, Doyle said from the door, voice thin. We don't index the past. We end it. Min didn't move. He was staring into a smaller crate, the kind used for spare parts or conscience. He lifted a fistful of metal and it glittered wrong under the lantern. Dog tags. 100 thin ovals whispering against each other like fish in a bucket. Why are these here? Min asked. Why not around necks? Why not in graves? He sifted for a minute that was also a year. His hand froze. When he turned a tag over, the light made the letters climb out. His name. Same blood type. Same religion stamped by a machine that hadn't met God. I'm missing, he said, almost to himself. I was here before I was here. The far hut was worse. Not ammunition, drums and crates with hazard codes that hummed with denial. I knew some numbers from training and rumors. Others were new, and new is a bad flavor in jungles full of old sins. We don't open those, Doyle said. We don't breathe near those. We teach the roof to fall, then we teach the ground to forget. We set charges like punctuation. Comma, comma, period. Scream. Doyle moved with a surgeon's indecision, precise and haunted. He kept touching his pocket where the brown paper maps lived, as if a heart could be folded flatter. Covering tracks, he said, not to us. Not ours. All of it. I paused at the doorway of the middle hut, my boot over a photograph that didn't want my soul. The picture showed a riverbank, a flare turning night into courtroom glare, silhouettes moving under that white, accusing star. Men, not uniforms, not clean. Faces wrapped in scarves. Weapons with no serial number left legible. I smelled bleach where there was no bleach. "Captain," I said, "what is this place?" Doyle looked away, then back, like a man checking whether a bridge was still there. "It's not a depot," he said. "It's a library no one can afford to read." Unauthorized raids, payoffs, wrong maps sent on purpose, lists of chemicals we never delivered to units that never existed. We erase it. We keep men alive who never learned our names by making sure no one learns theirs. The room tilted. Min stood with his tag in his hand like a pendant cut from his future. "You brought us to burn ourselves," he said. "I brought you because someone else would," Doyle answered, "and they'd stay to watch you die." The charges were set. The wires lay like veins. The timers waited with their small, patient smiles. We hesitated. The human kind, not the professional kind. My thumb found the safety on reflex, then found it again because the first time wasn't enough. "Captain," I said, "we can pull records. Take what names we can carry some truth." "And carry it where?" Doyle asked. "To which embassy that still answers phones? To which paper that still prints in this jungle? You want to be the witness? Witnesses don't live long." Min moved first, toward the file crates, toward the small mercy of a handful of pages. Doyle's pistol was out before the thought finished crossing the room. "No souvenirs," he said, the muzzle steady in that way only practiced sorrow learns. "Not today. Not from here." "They're not souvenirs," Min said. "They're people." Cat Eyes slid an eye toward me that meant too many things. "Stop him. Don't die. This is the wrong hill. The hill is made of paper and gasoline." In the far hut, a timer clicked with the politeness of a clock in a church. I felt it in my palms before I heard it. Time turning from maybe to absolutely. "Captain, your sequence," I said. "It's early," he said. "Maybe someone touched the wrong minute. Maybe the jungle did." He lowered the gun a hair, then raised it again. "We're out now." The first charge spoke in a bass voice, and the roof agreed. Rusted ribs lifted, paused in memory, then fell like tired lungs. Dust and spores and something older than both leapt to their feet and ran for our throats. We stumbled backward into a white so bright it felt like a verdict. "Out! Out! Out!" Voices crashed, Min coughing a prayer into a hand already slick, Cat Eyes counting men and losing count, someone screaming a name that wasn't on any tag in any crate. The second hut went, a low animal bellow, and the drums in the third began to sing a different, terrified note. I grabbed Min's collar and dragged him through paper that was on fire and still resisted folding. Pictures crisped into black lace. A child's face lit and vanished. A date disappeared, and it felt like a year falling through a hole. Outside, the clearing had turned into weather. Leaves fell up, the air shoved. A wave of heat taught my eyebrows humility. The radio on Doyle's hip woke on its own and spoke in languages made of static and emergency. Left! The ridge! The ridge! We ran the alphabet of escape. Knees, elbows, head, breath. Behind us, a drum let go of its patience, and a color you only see once bloomed out of the third hut, low and dirty and intimate. The sound came late, like a debt collector. A man screamed in a way that took the roof off the day. I didn't look which one. Some mercies are cruel and chosen. Cat eyes vanished into smoke, then reassembled at my shoulder like a trick. Min coughed pink and insisted he was fine, which is what dying men say when they want to keep their names longer. Cut the wire if you feel it, I shouted. Don't trust the ground. The jungle joined the fight, branches whipping, insects thrown into bureaucracy. White ash fell like a soft disgrace. Doyle's pistol fired once, twice, not at us, at something moving in a way men move when they mean to harm. We reached the lip, and the ridge grabbed us by the shirts. Below, the huts heaved their last arguments and settled. Fire crawled outward under the leaf litter like a rumor that found a microphone. The radio shouted coordinates that didn't exist. Tracks covered. Doyle rasped, eyes red, face gray. We keep walking. Min held the tag with his name until the metal burned his palm. He didn't drop it. The clearing boiled. The sky turned the color of a lie well told. When the world stopped screaming, the air didn't. It just shifted its voice. From explosion to ringing, from thunder to a long, low hum, like the jungle had taken over the choir. I woke face down in ash that used to be leaves, my mouth tasting of metal and apology. Cat eyes lay a few meters off, boots smoking, eyes wide open but seeing elsewhere. Min was moving, slow, deliberate, like the ground hurt him personally. Doyle was on his knees near a tree that had once been vertical. The pistol was gone, but his hand still gripped the ghost of it. We were 4, maybe 5 if the shadow behind the log still breathed. The fire had eaten the rest. Smoke made pillars out of memory. The huts were gone. Nothing left but ribs of twisted corrugation, and a crater still teaching the sky about heat. The air shimmered with tiny sounds, like insects tuning their instruments. We move, Doyle said, voice cracking around the order. Southwest, river first. None of us argued. You don't argue with someone who's already lost the debate with himself. We picked up what was left. My kit half melted, Min's hand bleeding around that same dog tag, Cat eyes limping like the ground owed him an apology. Doyle carried nothing but his radio, the cord swinging like a noose. The world turned grey before it turned green again. Every breath was a spoonful of smoke. The sun, when it showed itself, was only a rumor through the canopy, a coin tossed into mud. We followed a compass that Doyle checked every 10 steps, as if it might confess something new. He started talking that afternoon. Not to us at first. To the trees, maybe. Or the ghosts he'd built in his head. It wasn't my op, he said finally, his voice soft, as if volume might trigger another explosion. Command wanted a cleanse. Paper, names, photos. Burn the proof before they can wave it at a tribunal. You knew? Min asked. You knew from the start? Doyle didn't look back. I signed off. You think I had a choice? They called it sanitation detail. I called it my penance. I figured, better me than someone who enjoys it. Better you and a dozen prisoners, Cat Eyes said. How noble. Doyle didn't answer. He just kept walking, one hand on his stomach like it hurt to hold the rest of him in. By the second night, the rain came back. It didn't fall, it hunted. Heavy, directional, full of insects that rode the drops down like paratroopers. We found shelter under a cliff where the mud had ambitions of being quicksand. Min's fever came back, skin wet and wrong. Cat Eyes muttered coordinates in his sleep. Doyle sat by the radio, static like distant surf. Around dawn we heard them. Boots on wet leaves. The clipped talk of men who owned the night. Too careful for locals. Too slow for Viet Cong. Doyle looked up, eyes glassy. "Clean-up teams," he said. "American pattern. They'll torch what's left. Make sure no one crawls out to tell bedtime stories." "Our own?" I asked. "Not ours, not theirs. Just the janitors." We slipped upstream, crawling through reeds that cut like razors. Min stumbled once and the dog tag clinked. The sound was small, but metal carries truth farther than voices. Shots tore through the trees, single, precise, conversational. We hit the mud, breathing through fists. One round found Cat Eyes, not through the heart but the shoulder. He said he was fine. He wasn't. We lost him at the river bend. He said to go, to keep walking, that the water would take him if the bullets didn't. The water agreed. Min tried to stop. Doyle dragged him by the collar. By dusk, we were 3. The rain stopped out of respect. We moved toward the border that no one marked, only a change in the smell, the language of birds. Somewhere behind us, choppers muttered low, searching. They didn't fire. They didn't need to. The jungle does clean up better than soldiers. Doyle's voice thinned to a thread. "You'll make it," he told me. "You've got the stomach for silence. I don't." "We're not leaving you," I said. "You already have," he replied. "Back there, in the crater." "I'm just walking late." He handed me something wrapped in oilskin, a scrap of photo, burned at the corners. 3 men in fatigues standing by a Quonset hut, smiling like they'd just buried a secret. One of them was Doyle, younger. The other 2 wearing stars on their collars. "That's all the evidence that matters," he said. "Proof's just paper. Guilt lives longer." Then he turned off the radio, slung the empty pistol over his shoulder, and walked back toward the smoke. Min and I watched until he became just another shape between trunks. Then the jungle decided he was its problem, and he was gone. We said nothing. The kind of silence that isn't peace, just exhaustion. We reached the ridgeline 2 days later, out of food, out of numbers. Min's fever broke him. He lay down halfway through a clearing and said he'd rest for a moment. The tag on his neck gleamed, then dulled. I waited an hour before admitting he was gone. I buried him with what was left of my strength. Shallow, fast, cowardly. The earth didn't mind. I kept the charred photo, folded twice, pressed against my ribs under my shirt. It burned less than memory. I crossed into Laos alone, crawling under a fence that wasn't supposed to exist. The mud there had a different accent. I laughed once, short, stupid, at the thought that I was free. My laugh scared a bird and reminded the jungle that I was still a name. When I reached the river, I drank and vomited and drank again. The water tasted like ash. The sky had that grey that isn't quite morning. I looked back, waiting for something to follow. Nothing did. Even ghosts get tired. You can stop now, I told the trees. You've won. They said nothing, which felt about right. I started walking again, west, lighter by a country, and heavier by a story. The sea wakes before I do. It always has. The water knows when to arrive, when to leave, when to pretend it's calm. I don't ask questions anymore. I just listen. That's what age is. Learning to stop asking and start remembering in the right order. I live in a fishing village on the eastern Gulf of Thailand. The kind of place the map forgot, where salt lives in the air and the wind smells of wet rope and diesel. The mornings are grey until the sun remembers its job. The children here call me Uncle Bao. Not my real name, but that's fine. My real name belongs to a war, and the war doesn't send mail anymore. I have a small boat, wood patched with tin, engine coughing like a man with old secrets. I go out at dawn, come back by dusk, sell fish to men who don't care about who I used to be. That's how peace works. Not forgiveness, just forgetfulness that pays in cash. Around my neck, under my shirt, hangs a tag. The letters are half-eaten by time, but the name is still readable. It's not mine. It's Min's. He never left that jungle, so I take him where he never went. The metal warms with my skin when the sun gets high, cools again when the sea reminds it who's boss. Some nights, when the wind dies and the tide holds its breath, I dream I hear the click of timers. Not loud, just faint, like someone testing a fuse inside memory. I wake and it's only the waves tapping the hull. Still I count the seconds. Old habits are the bones of men like me. The village thinks I fought on one side or the other. They tell stories in both directions. 1 month I'm an American interpreter. Another I'm a Viet Cong defector. I never correct them. Truth doesn't float. It sinks with the rest of the wreckage. Besides, everyone prefers their own version of peace. Sometimes, at the market, I see tourists. They wear shirts with faded flags and drink beer before noon. They take pictures of the boats and say things like, "Imagine what this place saw." I don't have to imagine. I just keep gutting fish, and every slice of the knife sounds like paper tearing. 50 years. That's how long it's been since the smoke swallowed the huts. Long enough for trees to grow over what we burned. Long enough for names to dissolve in mud. But not long enough for the smell to leave. The nose remembers better than the heart. I tried to go back once, to the border, not the site. There's a road now, a paved one, lined with gas stations and new shrines. Men in uniforms I didn't recognize stopped me, asked for papers I didn't have. I told them I was looking for the river. They said there was no river here, only a canal. Maybe they were right. Maybe the river got tired of carrying ghosts. When I fish, I think about how the war erased us twice. Once with bullets, once with memory. The first time, men die. The second, the idea of them dies. What they stood for, what they knew, who they loved. That's the worst death, the kind nobody notices. They promised us freedom if we burned the past. We did. And the smoke is still rising. I see it sometimes, in the sky above the sea at sunset. That pink-gray ribbon, curling up like a signal no one answers. Maybe it's just weather. Maybe it's what's left of us. I don't know anymore. Sometimes I hum an old marching song, not because I liked it, but because silence feels heavier when you row. The sea doesn't care for politics. It just swallows everything that falls into it. Bullets, Bodies, stories, and men like me. There's a boy in the village who helps me patch nets. He once asked if I'd ever seen the war. I told him no. He smiled and said, "Lucky you." I smiled back. I didn't correct him. Lies are lighter to carry when they're kind. At night, when the tide is low and the moon drags its feet across the water, I take the dog tag off and let it hang over the gunwale. It taps against the hull, like Morse code from another century. I like to think Min hears it, wherever he's been reassigned. The sea forgives slowly, but it does forgive. The jungle never did. It keeps what you give it, metal, blood, secrets, and grows over them until you can't tell where the past ends. Maybe that's the right way to heal. Cover the wound with roots until even the ghosts can't find the entrance. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I see Doyle. He's still walking into the smoke, the radio silent, his back straight. I wonder if he found peace in those last steps, or if he's still pacing that ridge somewhere, trying to decide which way is out. I hope the jungle took him gently. The tide shifts. I pull the net one last time. The horizon glows, faint and false, like a flare that forgot what side it came from. I breathe the salt, taste the years. I think of all the men who never came back, and all of us who did but shouldn't have. I throw the fish onto the deck, one by one. Each hits with a sound like punctuation. Maybe that's what I've been doing all along, trying to end a sentence no one remembers starting. The sea is calm tonight. That should make it easier to sleep. But it never does. If you've made it this far, thank you. These stories take time to tell, and even longer to understand. You've just walked through the memories of men who were never supposed to be remembered. If their voices meant something to you, if even one line stayed behind when the sound faded, don't let it disappear. Give this video a like, share it with someone who still believes history belongs to the living, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next story. Every episode here is another page, another life, another truth pulled out of the smoke. Drop a comment too, not for the algorithm, but for the conversation. Tell me what you felt, or what you remember hearing from your own fathers, grandfathers, uncles, or friends. That's how these memories stay alive. Subscribe, stay with us, and let's keep turning the pages together.